and welcome everyone to Talent500 YouTube channel. I am Saumya, a software engineer and an educator. In today's detailed video, this is part 2 of the first video where we talked about the interview question for the mobile application development role. This is part 2 of the same video. Today we will discuss some very significant interview questions related to the role of mobile application developer. Let's deep dive into the topic and get started. Let's start with the tutorial interview questions for mobile application developers part 2. The question number 1 is, what are sensors in Android? So the Android based devices have an assortment of built-in sensors. Yes, built-in sensors are present in the Android devices and they measure certain parameters like motion, orientation, etc. And there are several types as well when we talk about sensors in mobile devices, in Android devices. These sensors help to monitor the positioning and movement of the devices with high accuracy. They can be both software or hardware based on nature, and the three prominent categories of sensors in Android devices are position sensors, motion, and environmental. Though these three types are self-explanatory, but let me explain you quickly. Might be that the interviewer asks you in detail about these three. So the first one, the position sensor. This one is used to measure the physical position of the Android devices. It includes orientation sensor and magnetometers. Let me write quickly. So it includes orientation sensor and magnetometer as well. Magnetometer. All right. And moving ahead, talking about motion sensor. These sensors include gravity, rotational activity, and acceleration sensors, which measure the rotation of the device or the acceleration and much more. And talking about the last one, the environmental sensor. So it includes sensors that measure the temperature or pressure, humidity, etc. Basically, environmental factors are measured by the environmental sensor. Moving ahead, I talk about memory leak in an application. So how do you find memory leaks in an application on the Android platform? This is question number 2. So Android device manager, basically we call it ADM, which is Android device manager. ADM is used, it helps in finding the memory leaks in an application on Android. The one word answer for this one will be ADM helps in finding the memory leaks in an Android application. So when you open ADM in Android Studio, you can see various parameters as well, like heap size, memory analysis, along with many other factors when you run any application. Awesome. Moving ahead, let's talk about the third question, that is, state the components which are must for a new Android project. So I will explain you by opening up the studio as well. But if you are a good Android app developer, so obviously these things should be on your tips, right? Number 1, if you just try to recall the structure of the Android Studio project. So number 1, manifest file, which contain all the significant details like user permissions, or how many screens are present in your application, the icon detail, the app name, all such details are present in manifest, right? Apart from that, there is the build directory, the build folder, and we have res, that is resource folder, src folder, as well as assets are very significant. And we also have those Gradle scripts in which we write the detail of the third-party dependencies, right? So let me quickly open up Android Studio to explain this one. So I'll quickly type here Android Studio and I'll explain the most significant components that are must for any Android Studio project. So I'm opening any random project from my studio. And here if you see, it's loading, the Gradle builds are happening. See here, just notice the cursor of my mouse. So this is the first folder, that is the first folder or first directory app. Inside this, as I told you, manifest folder is very significant. The Android manifest.xml file, it contain all the significant information from the icon, what will be the icon, if you have to mention any user permission, etc. So all those things like permission of internet, camera, if let's say your application, the app that you have developed will be using camera, so you need to ask the user for permission, right? Whenever we use any application, let's say Zomato or any such app, so you would have seen they ask for permission like gallery permission, internet permission, or permission to access location, etc. So depending upon all those like requirements, you can mention the permission here. Apart from that, all the activities which you create, all the screens that you create, like right now in this application of mine, I'm only having one activity, that is the main activity, but it might be that you need sign up activity, register activity, bottom navigation activity, and like that many more can be there. This intent filter is very significant. This is basically giving the kind of command to the main activity that hey, you are the launcher activity. If I'll put this intent filter in any other activity or a screen, so that will be the first activity that will be shown to the user. All right, so manifest is very significant. And inside Java folder, you have inside the package name, you have these two activities. Yeah. And apart from that, there is the res folder, that is a resource folder. We keep all our pictures, assets, image, everything inside drawable. Layout is very significant. It is used to design your application, the UI thingy. Yeah. And after that, you have your values folder as well. In map you have those like IC launcher is there, various resolution of the same icon is present here. And values, colors.xml, strings.xml. Well, you can work without strings.xml and such files as well, but it's a good habit to create a strings.xml where you can write the strings that you will be using in your application, right? Awesome. So in values folder, again you have colors.xml string, we noticed this. And then in xml you have extra stuff. And in the same way, in Gradle scripts, build.gradle files are significant because these are the files where you mention the details of any third party dependency. Let's say you have to use APIs in your application and you are using retrofit, volley, or for managing pictures you are using any third party library like glide. So in those cases, obviously you need to mention all the details in the Gradle scripts. So obviously when anyone asks you this thing, that is state the components which are must for any Android project, so you have to mention all these things. Just try to recall the structure of the project and mention these stuff. All right, though these things are very basic, but sometimes when someone asks suddenly like what are the must stuff for an studio project or something like that, we sometimes feel blank, right? That's why it's important to revise everything before the interview. And moving ahead, tell me the different data storage options that are available on Android platform. So let me quickly help you understand this. There are mainly like Android platform, it provides a variety of data storage options that can be used depending upon the need of the user. Like you have to tell in this way. And then the storage options are mainly four. Number one is, I'm writing here. So number one is shared preferences. Shared preferences. This is number one. It stores the data in XML files. It stores the data in XML files. And number two is SQL, which many of us have used multiple times. It stores structured data in the private database. It stores structured data in private databases. At number three, we have internal storage. and basically it stores the data in the device file system, which cannot be read by other applications. Okay, and then you have the external storage. So external storage stores data in the file system, but it can be accessed by all the applications in the device. Both are pretty much similar, the internal and the external storage, but the only difference is this one stores data in the device file system. It cannot be read by other applications in the device, but in this case the data can be accessed by all other applications of the device. Perfect. Moving ahead, what are the different tools which are available in the Android development, in the Android Studio? You have to explain the functions. So there are a variety of tools available to help Android developers. Let me quickly help you understand the significant ones. So number one, you have SDK and virtual device manager. Okay, so Android software development kit. Number one, Android software development kit, which is SDK, software development kit, and the virtual device manager. So this tool is used to generate and handle Android virtual devices, AVD and SDKs. Though like emulator in the AVD, through the emulator in the AVD, you can specify the supported SDK version, storage in the SD card, screen resolution, and other abilities like GPS or touch screen. Okay, so this is the number one tool which is available in the Android development, the software, basically Android software development kit. Talking about number two, so you have the Android emulator. The Android emulator is implementation of the Android virtual machine. It is designed to run processes within a virtual device itself. It can be used on a development computer. The main use of this is to test and debug the Android application. You can see the emulator here in your Android Studio. So for me, I have kept Nexus 5 and Pixel 3a. If you go in device manager, you can create a new device as well. Basically, it's kind of very much same as your actual physical mobile device. It is to help you in testing the applications quickly, whatever software you have built. Okay, so number one was Android software development kit, and number two, emulator. After that, we have number three, that is Android debug bridge, ADB. Now this might be new for many of you. Android debug bridge. This the ADB is a command line debugging application doled out with SDK. It enables the developers to communicate with the device and facilitate action like installation and debugging of an application. And talking about number four, the fourth tool. So fourth one is Android Asset Packaging Tool. Android Asset Packaging Tool, AAPT. This AAPT, it builds the .apk. It builds the .apk distributable Android package file. All right, so many times we are engrossed in writing the logic, the code of our application, and we don't focus much on these theory stuff. But might be in the interview you might be asked such questions which are very basic or theory based but are significant. Explain AIDL. If you already know what is AIDL, let me know in the comment section below. The full form for this is Android Interface definition language. It is a tool that let user abstract away IPC. It let users abstract away IPC. Now you will ask me, what is IPC? So it allows you to define the programming interface that both the client and service agree upon in order to communicate with each other using inter-process communication. Basically, AIDL, Android Interface Definition Language, facilitate the communication. You can just say a simple one-line answer for this. It facilitates communication between the client and the service. No need to go too deep into this one. If you know the full form, AIDL, Android Interface Definition Language, what it does, it facilitates communication between client and service. For the procedure of communication between processes, the data is split into small portions which are easily recognized by the Android platform. Basically, in short, AIDL facilitates communication between the client and the service. Sorted? Moving ahead, define the architecture of the Android. So Android architecture consists of 5 significant components. Okay, 5 significant components. Number 1 is Linux kernel. Number 2, platform libraries. I will explain each of these one by one. And number 3, Android runtime. Number 4 is Android applications. And number 5 is application framework. So now let's talk about the first one, that is Linux kernel. So Linux kernel forms the basis of the Android platform. It forms the basis of the Android platform, and the power feature like memory and power management, various drivers, it all is served by this one. It serves as an abstraction layer before the other layers. So in the Android architecture, which consists of 5 main components, number 1 is Linux kernel, which forms the basis of the Android platform. Number 2 is the platform libraries. Android platform libraries are native C and C++ libraries. They provide support for graphics, media, etc. This allows the developer to implement graphic functionality and display web content, among other things. Talking about Android runtime, so it is also called as ART. It is also called as ART, Android runtime, and the core libraries are among the most significant part of the architecture. It's the most significant part of the architecture. It serves as the foundation for the application framework and has features like optimized garbage collection, which is very important, right? And talking about Android application, the fourth component, so this is what you see when you use your phone, right? Whenever you use any application, so the Android app is the one which you see actually, and it is the top level of the architecture. Core applications like email, SMS and contacts, they come pre-installed in your phone. Otherwise, like we developers, the Android developers develop the application, right? This one is very common and we all use it, so it's very self-explanatory. And the last one, application framework. This contains classes that are used in the creation of an application. They provide the building blocks with which you can create app and provide services like resource manager, notification manager and activity manager. So this one contains the classes, classes with the help of which we developers can create the applications. Moving ahead, explain the dialog boxes supported on Android devices. If you have done Android development, I'm pretty much sure you would have already developed plenty of like dialog boxes, but sometimes we forget the types, right? So this is quickly to help you revise the types. There are mainly four dialog boxes. There are mainly four dialog boxes. Let's talk about them. Number one is alert dialog. Number one is alert dialog. Number two, date picker dialog. Date picker dialog. Number three is time picker dialog box. And last one, progress dialog. Progress dialog. Kind of self-explanatory, but quickly. Alert dialog, it supports 0 to 3 buttons. It supports 0 to 3 buttons along with a list of selectable items like radio buttons and check boxes. Date picker dialog, it is used for the selection of date by the user. Time for selecting the time by the user. Progress dialog, it is used to display a progress bar, and it is an extension of the alert dialog. It also supports the addition of buttons. Sorted? These are the four dialog boxes: alert dialog box, date picker, time picker, and progress dialog. All right. Moving ahead, these are the basically components when we talk about the normal built-in dialog box. This is the title, this is the message. This one is called neutral button, negative and positive button. So is there any difference between activities and services? Obviously yes, there are plenty of differences. Let me help you revise this concept of activities and services. So an activity is entry point of interacting with the user. It represents a single screen with a UI. For example, an email app might have one activity that shows list of emails, another activity to compose, and another activity for just reading the emails, right? And in the same way, services are general purpose entry point for keeping the app running in the background. So in this one, background, the keyword is very important, very important. It is general purpose entry point for keeping an app running in the background for all kind of reasons. It is a component that runs in the background to perform long running operations, or to perform work for remote processes. And a service does not provide a user interface, no UI. In this, it's all about UI. It has UI UX, right? It has UI. And apart from that, an example for services, service might play music in the background while the user is in a different application, right? So it helps in performing task in the background, or it might just fetch data over the network without blocking the UI with an activity. And another component, like the activity, it can start the service and let it run or bind to it in order to interact with it. It does not act independently. The activities, it doesn't act independently. It can act independently. And it is not designed to run behind the scenes. It is the main part. It is the UI, the activity, the screen, like main activity that we create, right? But this one is designed to run behind the scenes. So this is about activities and your services. And moving ahead, let's quickly talk about Android frameworks, which are very significant concept. So talking about Android framework, they are a set of APIs. They are a set of APIs. Android frameworks are a set of APIs that make the development process easy for us, for the developers. Developers can write apps quickly because APIs provide tools like intents, text fields, and more. It is essentially a software toolkit that allows us, the developers, to quickly construct the skeleton of an application. So Android framework is indeed a very significant concept. Summarizing it again for you. So Android framework, they are set of APIs to make development process easy for developers. All right, so this was about the Android framework. I hope all these theory part, all these stuff that we discussed will help you in your interview. Sometimes we think that these are very basic thing, like types of dialog boxes or any such thing, but when these things are asked in the interview, we feel blank, right? So it's good to revise quickly these concepts. And whenever you are watching these interview series kind of tutorials, you can switch to 1.5x or such a speed so that you quickly revise all the concepts, right? I hope this detailed tutorial was helpful for you. If yes, make sure you hit the like button and also subscribe to Talent 500 YouTube channel. If you have any queries, any doubts, drop them in the comment section below and we will be happy to answer them.